So let's check out some of the strongest Space Dwarf armies around with a look at how Votann are getting on in early tournaments. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Leagues of Votann once more, and I thought it would be fun to revisit some Votann army lists, particularly after Games Workshop took the nerf hammer to the army with fairly spectacular effect, often meaning that several armies that you could have fielded before went up in the region of something like 300 to 400 more points. Of course, the Leagues of Votann are in a bit of a weird place at the moment. Their codex is out and about thanks to the launch box, and people have been able to get their hands on a few units, namely the Hearthkin Warriors, Hernkin Pioneers, and some characters. It means that at the moment, the vast majority of events won't be using all their datasheets, but there do seem to be a few road trader tournaments that seem to be allowing proxies, or maybe played on TTS. I thought we'd just take a look at a few of the ones that seem to be de-restricted and are allowing unreleased units to be played, and see what some people are putting together for the army after the heavy points increases. Before we get into those main lists, I thought it would be interesting to at least take a look at one of the more restricted unit lists. The Chicago Open in the USA was one of the first events to allow Leagues of Votann into a major tournament. It seems that they had to run the official models, and it looks like there were 4 players in total. The army list that did the best out of them was this one by Garrett Stacey, taking 21st overall and racking up a decent number of victories. Only having 4 unit choices to go at, this one has obviously got a fair bit of spam. They've taken the Immo Conglomerate, which is largely being seen as probably the strongest one now that the nerf to Judgment tokens went through. The extra boost to range on all guns through the army, plus a 5+ invul save on everything, and better on heavies. Seems like a pretty nice setup just for standard Hearthkin Warriors, which this list has plenty of. The list is led by a High Carl with a Bolter and the Relic Flare Axe. He can hand out Judgment tokens and also has Warrior Lord. That one seems to be one of the most commonly picked Warlord traits, allowing you to reroll wound rolls and also punch through feel no pains and damage caps, so it could be a good counter to certain units on the other side of the board. Flare is the plasma axe that gives you a strength of 6, AP3 and damage 2, but most importantly gives you an extra 3 attacks on that same profile, so he is quite a major threat. For extra judgment, he's also backed up by a regular Carl as well. He also has a Rampart Crest, Axe and Bolter, and he takes the Unrelenting Toil Warlord trait. That one allows you to do actions and still shoot, kind of important for things like the Hearthkin Warriors. Then moving on to the troop section, we have an awful lot of Hearthkin, a mighty host of 70 Space Dwarves slogging across the board, all just a little bit harder to take out with that 5+ invul save from Ymir, and a bit longer range with those bolters at 28 inches with the trait. Every one of the squads takes the Medipack, Scanner and Comms combo. The Comms allows their rerolls to go a bit further, the Medipack allows you to ignore the first failed save and use that stratagem to resurrect models, and the Scanner lets them ignore cover and do the intercept stratagem. With only limited units available, these guys have to do work, so I guess it makes sense to get some pretty maximal investment on the go. Otherwise, beyond that, there's 2 longer ranged ones with bolters, 2 sets of 10 there, and also with a Magna Rail rifle. Perhaps they're a bit more aimed to hold down backfield objectives, and then pushing up the board there's an awful lot of them with ion blasters. Solid strength 5 damage 2 shots that will make a mess of enemy elites and really light judgment tokens, plus you could potentially use that mortal wound stratagem, though it's a bit less good if you've got lots of judgment on the target. Perhaps the most intimidating ones are the 2 blocks of 20 with ion blasters and each having a Magna Rail rifle buried within the squad. They seem like pretty reasonable targets for the High Carls for rerolls. If you do manage to get lots of judgment tokens on the go, they can even be really quite threatening in combat as well. Even strength 4 AP0 attacks are going to be quite big if they auto wound. Then, perhaps not unexpectedly, there's 3 maxed out units of Hernkin. Fairly efficient shooting, plus fast obsec is a really nice combo. Each of the 6 dwarf units also takes a couple of rotary cannons as well, very cheap extra firepower, plus searchlight, scanner and comms, all of which are handy, and you can use the searchlight to dole out some more judgment tokens on the most important thing. With the pre-game move, they could get onto safe objectives early, and they seem like pretty ideal units for just focusing fire with loads of general purpose shots against whatever gets judgment marked. Obviously, this one's a very limited unit selection, and I think after the nerfs it is kind of impressive that even a list with this limited units is doing kind of well. I feel like this kind of army does have a fair bit of limitation though. There's a lot of things that it just can't really do, heavy melee and psychic defense being a couple of them, so certainly doesn't look like the easiest to play in my book. Moving on though, I thought it would be interesting just to take a look at a few lists that look like they've done okay in smaller road trader tournaments, and it is interesting to see what sort of units are getting the nod. I feel like data from these is maybe just a tiny bit less reliable than lists that top big tournaments. As to go through 5 rounds against some of the best lists around, you do guarantee that you basically need to have a very efficient list, where with smaller tournaments there might be just a little bit of an element of getting lucky, or maybe just that they're being played by a particularly skilled player. A list that win do kind of show that they are pretty capable. First up we have a list from the Irani Surta Regulars, this one by a Shane Watts who used it to take first at Tables and Towers RTT. Ursa are the ones that give you the +1 toughness, really quite a nice boost that makes the army a lot more durable as a whole, including making scary land fortresses go all the way up to toughness 9. Again, the list is led by a high Carl. Those 4 rerolls do seem kind of hard to pass up. He's got a Mass Gauntlet, Vulcanite, and a Teleport Crest this time, and to back him up he's got an Ironhair Champion friend. That one takes the Exactor Hammer, a Weaverfield Crest for the extra toughness, and Warrior Lord for rerolling those wounds with the scary D3+3 damage. An Ironhair Champion with Exactor really does seem like it's a choice that's kind of hard to go wrong with. Massive extra combat damage, either mortal wounds or just raw D3+3. Otherwise, to fill out the troop slots, there's 3 minimum units of Hearthkin Warriors, each with 10 of them with the bolters. Again, they're taking the med pack and the scanner, passing up on the comms array, and going for the Magna Rail rifle for a bit of Ignor's Invul anti-tank punch. It's far less likely to trigger the splash damage, but it's still a very scary weapon, even if you don't get that. There's then 2 Chthonian Berserks with plasma axes. They might be hiding in the land fortress, or I guess they could just be hiding behind terrain. They're still generally very good damage for the points, even up at 30, though certainly a much bigger investment unit than they were before. Despite the very hefty points increase, there's a unit of 10 Hearthguard here. It seems that Hearthguard are still being run quite a bit. They do feel like quite an easy unit to use, but I must admit being costed all the way up at 45 points does make them kind of expensive. There's an enormous 450 point unit here. They take the Vulcanite weapons and the Plasma Blades, plus Teleport Crest with Warp Strike. Warp Strike is the one that allows you to use the site-to-site teleportation for 0 CP. Basically makes them really quite good to shunt turn 1 and get all that Vulcanite shots into something juicy. It has a couple of other minor benefits, moving through enemy infantry and also not allowing enemies to set up within 12 inches of them. They are a unit that's basically guaranteed to make an impact though. Juice them up with the High Carl's rerolls and try and fish for those 6s to spam out a whole load of mortal wounds at something. Plus they do have the chance of making the charge and getting to work with a whole ton of plasma blades. I guess they're a bit tougher to kill as well in the Irani Surta as they get to toughness 6 as well, but still only 2 wounds and -1 damage isn't awesome for 45 points. A staple in just about every one of the lists, we have 2 Hernkin units with a rotary cannon, searchlight and scanner. Solid firepower, fast obsec, and judgment token handing out. I think they're going to be a unit that's hard to pass up. And then we have the Hecaton Land Fortress with the scary rail cannon. Again, much less likely to get the splash damage now that the judgment tokens got nerfed, but still it's got a whole load of shots. It's very tough at toughness 9 in this army, and is a massive gun that's going to blast a whole load of anti-tank damage straight through your invul saves. Overall, seems like a quite nice and fairly balanced Votann list. A bunch of units in representation. I might have been tempted to go a little bit more character heavy myself, I guess, but generally looks like quite a balanced list for the Votann, a good mix of shooting and melee. Next up, for a fairly different take, is a Great Etherean League list, this one on Best Coast pairings from a Rob LeBeau, first at Dice Saloon RTT. This one's organised into 2 different patrol detachments, which seems just to be mainly aimed to get more HQs in the list, as I think that's the only thing that benefits. This one is a very character heavy list. It's led by High Carl Uthar the Destined, who can spread the Judgment Token love around, but also gets that rule where he gets to convert 1 dice to a 6 per turn. Pretty nice with making a rail rifle hit extra hard. There's then a Grimnir where the spells aren't listed, though I'd guess it's most likely to use the command point generating 1 and the Fortify spell to make a unit tougher, and a Brockier that's upgraded to the Forge Master, who takes the Long List Warlord trait, again to allow you to spread some Judgment tokens around. Very nice for the Great Etherean League, who count them as being 1 extra. Again, there's an Ironhair Champion with the Exactor Hammer and the Warrior Lord trait. We saw that before for the reroll wounds and ignore damage caps. Then there's some troops Hearthkin that are set up in a very similar way. Bolters, a med pack, a scanner and a single rail rifle. Solid units to hold the line, and they haven't taken the bare minimum of them either. There are 2 units when they could have taken 1 in the patrol. Again, the Hearthguard are out in force despite their 45 point cost. They have the Teleport Crest and the Vulcanite with Plasma Blades. Again, they seem pretty excellent just for teleporting across the board, perhaps using the discounted CP from the Brock here, and also getting full rerolls to hit from Uthar before they go. A big Vulcanite punch, then hopefully a charge if they get lucky. Finally, the rest of the list is rounded out with Hernkin, 2 units of 6 with the rotary cannons and all 3 upgrades, and then 1 smaller unit with a rotary cannon that passes out on the comms array. Quite cool to see a different take overall. This one goes very heavy on the excellent characters. I feel like the Votann ones are particularly good value. And again, it's kind of interesting to see another full unit of Hearthguard in use. I guess they do solve a lot of issues for the Votann, even if they do have to pay 450 points for such a unit. Finally, last but not least, here we have an Ime conglomerate list. This one run by a Joshua Herrera who used it to take third at a GW organised play event. Though as best I can tell from Best Coast pairings, it did look like he got 3 wins with it. Again, this one's arranged into 2 patrols, this time for more fast attack and fewer troops, and again more HQs. Leading the army, there's both a high car and a regular car. They both take the teleport crest, I guess because the rampart crest invul saves aren't as important in Ymir with the invuls and the range, and the high car does take the experienced I1, allowing him to dole out an extra judgment token. Then there's an Einherjar champion who eschews the usual Exactor hammer for a Darkstar axe. I feel in general that's not particularly tempting unless you are playing Ymir, as then you can use the Guild Connections one to give it an extra +1 damage and actually make it a lot more threatening. There's then a Brockir Forge Master who takes the Master Armourer trait. He works absolutely great with the land fortresses, stopping incoming damage by turning off a shot each turn, making one of them hit better, and also repairing a whole load of wounds each turn as well. The land fortresses themselves are pretty interesting. There's one with a rail cannon, and this is one of the few lists that I've seen that are running a lot of ion beamers. I feel like a lot of people I've seen have just been running the standard bolt cannons. Kind of fun to see the ion beamers in play. One of the land fortresses takes the rail cannon, and one takes the SP conversion beamer. Between the Ymir stratagem and the core burst of fire pattern stratagem, I do feel like they could be pretty interesting with all those beams going on. At least a decent amount of chance of handing out lots of mortal wounds if you can manage to skewer multiple units. They'd be really quite annoying to remove as well with a big 4+ invul save, on top of their 2+ save with the void armor. To fill out the patrols, there's 2 units of 10 Hearthkin, each of them with ion blasters, comms, medpack and scanner. Again, maybe the ion blasters are a little bit more viable in the Ymir, seeing as they actually make them 22-inch range, so a bit less likely to be outranged by the enemy. These guys don't take any of those Magna Rail rifles this time though. Next up, there's a unit of 8 Chthonian Berserks with the plasma axes. Again, they're a bit more of an interesting choice in Ymir as well. The 5+ invul save makes them into a genuinely reasonably tough unit, as opposed to one that feels really quite fragile with a 6+ save and just the feel no pain after that. I guess these guys could either hide behind terrain or ride in one of the land fortresses. I do still feel that their short charge range is a bit of an issue. There's a different flavour of Hearthguard on this one as well. 5 Hearthguard with the plasma guns, concussion gauntlets and a Weaverfield crest. A bit more aims to slog up the board maybe. I guess they could be a reasonable target for the high car rerolls if you had to pick something. And then in this army there's only 1 unit of 3 Hernkin Pioneers with a Searchlight, Ion Beamer and Scanner. It's definitely a Votann list of a bit of a different feel, this one. Perhaps some of the most interesting things are the land fortresses with the beamers and a small unit of foot-slogging Hearthguard as well. They seem to be a little bit less common choices maybe. In any case, let me know what you make of the list. It's going to be interesting to see what sort of things establish themselves as the best things to play Votann in 9th edition. Let me know your thoughts on any of the armies down in the comments below, or if there's any other insights as to how they were played, and if there's any other improvements or different ways of playing that you might have thought about doing instead. I must admit, I'm a little bit surprised not to see more Sagittars here. Maybe it's perhaps because they're a bit harder to convert, perhaps. I do feel like them with Chthonian Berserk still seems like really quite a strong option on paper. In any case, if you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be looking to do a few more Votann videos over the next weeks or so, and I'll cover some tournament Votann lists once they do start hitting them with their full model complement in earnest. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description if you're interested. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying it all, then any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.